of all, longtime viewer, Cobra Commander, one of our trusted moderators, said, "What inspires you?" Question for both Carlos and Eddie. Great question, Cobra. Thank you. And thank you for everything that you do for our institute, as well. I would say it's hard for me because when it comes to it's hard for me to answer that question because when it comes to things that I genuinely care about and that I genuinely like doing, I'm not a person who lacks motivation. I'm not a person who lacks drive. I'm not a person who lacks passion. I tend to have that um, sort of overflowing, even sometimes my passion and my ability to work hard even supersedes my skill or my aptitude for something, and I'm able to overcome a lack of skill or a lack of natural talent with hard work and with passion. That's kind of been like the MO for my entire life. But I don't know, man. When I figured out, like, I've always felt, I remember saying, like, in government classes in high school, like, why are we spending all this money on drones and why are we spending all this money on warfare and bombs and not investing that money in education, in healthcare, and things that made sense? Like, that was always the core of my politics. And then when I found out what socialism was, I'm like, okay, this just seems like common sense. But it confused me that the people who considered themselves Marxists and who considered themselves socialists didn't seem that urgent to try and spread socialism, to try and recruit new people to socialism, to try and educate people about socialism so we can actually change the system. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of the reason is the collapse of the USSR was just such a freaking blow to the global socialist movement, including here in the United States. It turned a lot of people away from revolutionary politics. But I don't know, the way I look at it, I look at the way that the world is. Look at the way that the capitalist mode of production is organized and the modern global neoliberal economy is organized. I just think this can't stand. How are we allowing this? How are humans so freaking intelligent and able to create so much, amazing technology and things like get that, and yet we're still fighting wars for conquest with each other. We still have millions of people starving. We still have hundreds of thousands of people dying because they don't have access to basic healthcare, and all of this stuff is unnecessary, right? We have the technology to and the productive forces to feed everybody, to provide everybody healthcare, but because of the way that our system and our productive forces and that labor is organized, we don't. We allow millions of people to die. So for me, I wake up and feel that urgency every day. Like, what the hell are we doing? And if we don't start now, if we don't start moving people towards socialism now, maybe it'll never happen. Like we may never get to see the fruits of our labor. We may just be sowing the seeds for a socialist revolution that comes years and years and years from now, after the American consciousness has changed. But if we don't start changing the American consciousness, who will? And if the more that we put it off and the more that we say, well, America's anti-communist, so we might as well not even try, the further off we're pushing the potential of a socialist revolution. So that's kind of a long answer, but yeah, that's what inspires me. What inspires me is people, humanity, my friends and family who I feel like are being exploited by a ridiculous, anarchic and contradictory system that's completely outdated and unnecessary at this stage of humanity's development.
That's beautiful to hear. And I share a lot of that as well. I've mentioned this a few times, but my grandfather is someone who was very influential for me growing up, in ways that it's been only after his death that I've been able to reflect on how influential he's been for, just the way I carry myself. And he taught me something that I, after becoming a Marxist, realized was something from Che and the process of transforming social consciousness in Cuba, which was, every time that there would be like a situation where people are affected, it doesn't matter what part of the world they're in. He taught me to always have like a connection to that suffering as if it was my family. Um, a deep sense of empathy. Um, and that's developed into like a deep sense of sadness when a struggle in one part of the world loses, and a deep sense of joy when the struggle in one part of the world wins. So in terms of like motivation and the stuff that gets me pumped, gets me emotional, it's those sorts of victories, the anger of the step backs, the anger of realizing the conditions that people are in, the people around me, myself included. You know, I'm part of this reproletariat class that lives in utter poverty and debt slavery. But to be honest, I think that, and I wonder if you'd agree, this is something that was true for me when I was an athlete and is true now. I think motivation is less important than discipline, and just crafting the right habits. There's a lot of times where I'm not motivated to do something, um, and I still have to do it, and that's something the ability to do that is a result of discipline, not motivation. If we wait till we're motivated to do stuff, we'll do a very small fraction of the things that we end up doing. So I do a whole lot of things out of discipline, and I think I've said it maybe a time or two before that what I really like, I mean, what my profession is philosophy. You know, if it was up to me, I'd spend 90 something. If we were already in socialism, I'd spend most of my time just writing philosophy and doing, you know, interpretive hermeneutic work of various classical texts, stuff that's hard to decipher. But I have a sense of duty to like contribute whatever I can to the class struggle. And so again, a lot of that work, yeah, it motivates me, but I do it out of discipline and a sense of duty, oftentimes more than just motivation.
Absolutely. And I agree. That's what you'll hear from a lot of high level athletes. Like, you're not always going to be motivated, right? But if you promised yourself that you were going to do something, if you promised yourself that you were going to do 2 practices a day, because that's what you need to do to get ready for the competition, then you should hold yourself accountable to do 2 practices a day. You know, we not every week we want to do 3-4 streams, but we hold ourselves accountable and do good work. And then usually once you throw yourself into it, once you start practicing or whatever, then you kind of gain some motivation. You get the endorphins flowing. You know, it's forcing yourself to start doing something. But yeah, I would encourage everybody to join a party or some way, some kind of collective group where you can hold each other accountable as well. Because if Midwestern Marks, I think if I speak for any of us, if it was just me or just Carlos or just Noah, who knows if Midwestern Marks would even still be going, and it would be a fraction of what it is today. You know, we communicate with each other every single day, not just as like, what are we doing today, but like as friends, like encouraging each other with life, being there to support each other when rough things inevitably happen. So yeah, you also need a group that can hold each other accountable, and you can help each other learn and develop and critique when critique is necessary.
Uh, can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
Another thing that was a huge factor, and I didn't know if it was going to be or not, but after the birth of my son, a little over 11 months ago, it adds like a new sense of urgency because you feel the sense of duty that I was mentioning is not like limited to just like your generation or something or to your lifespan. It becomes something intergenerational. Like you feel like you have a duty to your kids' generation and to the generations after that as well. So at the personal level, that's another thing that you know fighting so that even if I don't experience it in my lifetime, maybe he can.
I know Diego Rusarin, our buddy, says the same thing. I was lucky enough to go on his show last week, and we'll be having him on our show this week. Says something very similar. When his son was born, it was I believe it was his son. When his child was born, though, it was this big sense of, holy crap, the world that I'm leaving behind for him or leaving him to inherit is really, really messed up. And it's not designed to allow my son to flourish. It's designed to exploit them. And the term that Diego uses, which has become a popular term in the era of neoliberalism, is human capital. And Diego kind of mocks that term and says, when my son was born, I realized even more than I already had that humans are so much more than human capital. That humans have all these capabilities, and with love and support and a positive environment, human beings can flourish and do all these amazing things. But we need care, we need community, we need each other. And that's just not what we get in this cutthroat, individualistic, consumeristic, neoliberal society. So it makes sense that it's inspiring that having a kid makes people want to change the system. Not something I've experienced myself yet, but makes perfect sense.